morning. Welcome to the Action Network NFL Power Hour. We're kicking it off with Convince Me, presented by Bet365. Stick around after this show. Directly after this show, we're transitioning to the Touchdown Show with Gilles Gallant and Nick Giffen. Everything you need to know to get your best anytime touchdown props. I am joined this morning, as I am every episode of the show, Sean Koerner, Simon Hunter, Chris Raybon, our Action Network NFL betting experts. We got Samantha Previte with the fantasy updates, Darren Rovell on the Action Network news desk. Everything we're talking about, all the data, all the picks, all the research available for free in the award-winning Action Network app. As I said, we are presented by Bet365, the world's favorite sportsbook brand. Sign up with promo code ACTION to get Bet365 exclusive sign-up offer in New Jersey and Colorado. Bet $1 on any game, get $200 free. We promise all the stuff, none of the fluff, so let's get right to it. Sean Koerner, we're talking about some player props. What do you got?
Yes. So I got Josh Jacobs over 18.5 rush attempts. He's cleared this number in 3 of 5 games this year, despite the Raiders only being 1-4. So today, they're 7-point home favorites against a Texans defense that ranks 29th in DVOA against the run. You better believe they're going to pound it heavily with Josh Jacobs here, especially with Darren Waller out, and Hunter Renfrow will probably be limited with his hip injury. And Josh Jacobs, he's accounted for 79% of Raiders rush attempts this season. That's jumped up to 82% whenever they've had the lead this year. So the only win this season, he had 28 rush attempts. I'm projecting him closer to 20.5. And I think there's a 62% chance he clears 18.5. And he's actually my number 1 ranked back in fantasy this week as well.
Seriously. Number 1 ranked Josh Jacobs of the Las Vegas Raiders is your number 1 ranked fantasy running back. What do you have the ceiling at? You said 20.5. What would you bet this to? Would you bet it to 20.5?
Well, I wouldn't bet to 20.5. That's my median. But I do like his ceiling in this market. He could, clear 25. I would bet this up to 19.5. If it's probably going to stay at 18.5, I would bet it up to about -130, -135.
All right, we're going to get more Raiders-Texans talk later in the show. Simon Hunter, what do you got?
Back again with an anytime touchdown. Brian Robinson, our guy, Washington. Just it felt like a pick I could not make, where I feel like he's a focal point of that team now. We saw last week they want to get him touches. We know that with quarterback situation there, right? They got a backup starting. What are you going to do? You're going to rely on the run game in that kind of situation. Just so happens Green Bay, they're terrible against the run. Coming in, they're 27th in the league against the run. That's the biggest weakness on that defense, it seems like. So to me, Brian Robinson's got fresh legs right now, right? Coming into week 7, he's only played in 1 game. He had 17 touches last week. They clearly want to get him the ball. At +165, that just feels inflated. That feels like an inflated line where it should be closer to +115, +120. I like the free value on that. So to me, in anytime touchdown, you're getting a big plus odds like this. It's nice where you kind of have the backup of you're getting a good number. Like it's just, even if you don't get close, you don't hit it, you can't complain because, again, you only need to hit so many of these to get your money back when it's +165. So I like the number, I like the value, and I just like the situation for Brian here.
So I feel like you're doing this just to pimp the fact we have the Anytime Touchdown show with Gilles Gallant and Nick Giffen coming on next. And that's what I love about you, Simon. You're totally media savvy, and that's fantastic. But also, who doesn't love a narrative? Who doesn't love a Washington football team, which has a backup quarterback, like you said, with a running back they're trying to get more and more involved in the offense against a Packers team that none of us have any faith in a number where we think we might like the Commanders. I don't know, Simon. That's a pretty good one. Raybon, last week you promised me Ian Thomas under 9.5 receiving yards. You're like, he's only going to get 1 catch at the most. You got to take Ian Thomas. You totally convinced me. I didn't go with Koerner and Tyler Higbee, which was an easy cash. I went with Ian Thomas. I don't know. Should I have faith in you this week?
We'll see. I mean, I'm going with Tony Pollard over 34.5 rushing yards. He has 43 in 4 of his 6 games this year. The 2 he didn't came against top 8 defenses in rushing DVOA in the Bucks and the Commanders. this Lions defense is second to last in run defense DVOA. It's not a very good defense at all. So you look at Pollard and they're 6.5 point home favorites here. So they should have a lot of high play volume. And just dating back to last season, he's had 41 or more rushing yards in 13 of 19 and 43 or more in 4 out of 6 this year. So I actually have him projected for about 49 rushing yards. So I would bet this up to 44.5.
Listen, these props are moving like crazy. We talk about this all the time on this show and generally at Action Network, how the player prop markets are becoming more and more important if you want to be an active bettor, and they're becoming easier to find advantages in than a lot of the size and a lot of the totals, which becoming stingier. So the fact these things move like wildfire, you got to get them while you can. Raybon, let's say I don't want to bet Tony Pollard, and it has nothing to do with the fact I've lost faith in you because of Ian Thomas. Let's just say that I'm piqued by the fact that Koerner just said Josh Jacobs is his number one rated fantasy running back. Which ones do you like better? Brian Robinson, anytime touchdown, Josh Jacobs over 18.5 rushing attempts.
Ooh, give me Josh Jacobs because he's I got him for 19.5. So Sean made a great point that they're 1-4. They've been in a lot of negative game script, and Jacobs has still cleared this number at a high rate. Anytime touchdowns, I like Brian Robinson a lot, but I think like the safer bet is Jacobs, obviously.
I agree. I feel like 18.5 is still high, and you're not seeing running backs get that 20, 25 carries as often as you used to. But this feels like the right spot. I think, against the Texans, against a bad rushing defense in a game where they're going to try to be conservative, make the game go quickly. I like this one. I know we're going to talk a little bit more Texans Raiders later in the show. I'm going with Josh Jacobs over 18.5 rushing attempts. Listen, in Koerner and Raybon, we have like two of the best fantasy projectionists in the world. So people should take advantage of that. Rovell, give me some news, man.
We're looking at bets, Chad. Most bet games, not surprising. Giants, Jaguars. What is surprising is among the most bet teams, it's the Jaguars -3. I mean, that is the square. The Giants are so meaty to me, obviously. Most bet games number 2 is Chiefs, 49ers. People obviously like the Chiefs there, -1.5. And then, of course, the grossest game that could be had this week, the Jets Broncos without Russell Wilson. Maybe it gets better with Russell Wilson. And so that's the third most bet game. The third most bet team by money after the Chiefs -1.5 and the Jaguars -3 is the Packers -4.5. So God, people just can't get enough despite what they've seen. Chad?
Yeah, but Darren, the Packers, I would expect you love the Packers this week. If you're going to go square, to me, you love the Packers.
Yeah, but what you miss is my hate. You're right, but my hatred for Aaron Rodgers knows no bounds.
Okay. Well, listen, I know you've got a poll coming up later in the show that is anytime touchdown related. We'll get to it. We're doing everything we can to remind you guys that the Anytime Touchdown Show, the touchdown show about anytime touchdowns with Gilles Gallant and Nick Giffen coming up after this. You mentioned the Giants and the Jaguars. You kind of intimated that the Jags are the square side. So what does that make Sean Koerner for what he's about to say?
Isn't it the second most money? It's not the second most tickets though, right?
It's the second most money. You are correct.
Yeah.
All right. So that could make it a sharp side.
Right. It could.
All right. Well, let's see what Koerner has to say.
Hold on 1 second. Okay. Let me just tell you that the most bet prop across the board, and I'm going to get to this in my second segment, but since we're talking about sharps being squares, the single most bet prop is Tony Pollard over 35.5. This is as square as Raybon has ever been. I just had to get that in, but I'll tell you more about props in my second segment.
It's because I bet it, and then everyone else bet it.
Yeah, it's free money. That's why.
Right.
I was going to say that's a self-fulfilling prophecy right there. Koerner, let's talk about some sides.
Yeah, so I'm on the Jaguars -3. I haven't figured out if it's a sharp or square play yet, but I'm sticking with it. And if you recall, back in week 1, I tried to convince you to take the Giants +5.5 over the Titans. I said they were an underrated team. and they would benefit from new head coach Brian Daboll having a more analytical approach. And sure enough, they're off to a 5-1 start. However, all 6 of those games have been one possession games, and that is a huge reason why they continue to rank atop our luck rankings. So, last week the public was still not buying in on the 4-1 Giants. 65% of the action was on the Ravens. However, this week, when I was writing this article anyway, 62% of the action was on the Giants. It does appear more money has been coming on the Jaguars. I think it is the sharp play here. And I think part of that is, the 62% of the action being on the Giants. I think part of that was people fading the Jaguars as well. And they've been a bit unlucky over the past 3 weeks. They've lost 3 straight games by 1 possession. And they actually rank as the 4th unluckiest team in our luck ranking. So this matchup has a luck ranking differential of 27. And since we've started tracking these luck rankings back in week 3, anytime there's been a luck differential of 16 or more, the unluckier team has gone 14-2 against the spread. So I'm riding with the luck rankings here. And, my gut would say, yeah, the Giants +3 seems like easy money, but both of these teams have played closer to 3-3, sort of 500 teams. And I would argue the Jaguars are the more complete team. They rank 8th in DVOA, while the Giants rank 18th. So I think just the perception for both of these teams is still a bit off. So I like the Jaguars -3 today.
Listen, I love the luck rankings. It's one of my favorite things that we started doing this year. And it brings so much into focus. How often do we as bettors and we as fans try to quantify how unlucky we've been, what a bad beat looks like, when there is going to be a regression to the mean, and how to value that as bettors? Luck rankings is taking all of the guesswork out of that. What Koerner just described about the difference between the luck the Giants have had, winning as many games as they had on final possessions in the 4th quarter, versus the luck the Jags have had. Last week, Trevor Lawrence having the best statistical game in NFL history as a quarterback to lose. It tells you everything you need to know. Very interesting take. Very interesting. But I know Koerner, I know Raybon might feel differently, so we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Simon, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm going to be on the Titans this week. I didn't like them coming into the week. I felt like it was a fishy line, a trap game, but I've turned. The more I've looked at this team, the Titans on paper, and just the fact they're coming into this situation, it feels like the right time and spot to take a team. And again, Evan talked about in his article, the trends, they all point to this Tennessee team. Again, off the bye week, we've seen Vrabel in his early coaching career 4-0. He gets his team right with more than 10 days to prep. That's a big deal to me, especially when they're going up against a Colts team that he's dominated. Him and Tannehill have really, really played well against this Colts team historically. At home, under a field goal against a divisional foe that just came off a last-minute win against another divisional team. Again, the Colts just feel like that team that maybe I'm stepping in front of it, Chad. Maybe they're the hottest team in the world, and I'm just going to keep losing, betting against them. But come on. This is way too short of a number. This should be closer to 3.5, 4. We've just seen Tennessee matches up well with this Colts team. So to me, a high dosage of Derrick Henry, smart game plan by Vrabel and defense. I like a lot of what this Tennessee team can do. And I feel like you're getting good value on a team that people are acting like the Colts are way better than they are just because of what happened these last couple of weeks. They've stolen a couple of games. You feel like you're paying for it if you're buying this line at +2.5. I'll take the good value. And I'll take the home favorite here in Tennessee.
I was shocked when I saw you put this into the script this morning. I'm going to come back. I got some more questions for you, but I want Raybon to give us his choice.
I'm going with Seattle +5 at the Los Angeles Chargers. And I think this is a good matchup for Seattle. First of all, their offense going up against the Chargers, they're 27th in pressure rate without, Joey Bosa's been out. And Geno Smith from a clean pocket, a passer rating of 115. That's up from 89 when he's under pressure. So this is a great matchup for him in that sense. And then the Chargers also play man coverage at the 7th highest rate in the league. Seattle's 10.7 yards per targeted pass against man coverage, ranked 2nd in the league. So everything about this matchup on offense kind of favors Seattle against that Charger defense. And they're going through some things. Remember, J.C. Jackson got benched in the last game against Denver, but this offense is a lot more prolific than Denver. And then on the other side, Seattle's defense has been improving a little bit. They made some schematic changes. They started playing more of like a big nickel, bringing Josh Jones in instead of Cody Barton in their base defense so they could cover better, underneath and over the middle. And Tariq Woolen on the outside, he may only have to deal with Mike Williams because, Keenan Allen's going to probably be on a pitch count if he goes at all. He's still iffy. And Joshua Palmer got ruled out as well. So they're a little short on weaponry in LA, and this is a recurring theme for them. So I just think the perception between these two teams is a lot, farther than it really is. If you look at it, Seattle's actually the better team on paper than LA. Seattle is 9th in overall DVOA, even with the defense struggling, and the Chargers are 11th. So give me the Seattle Seahawks on the road here.
I love this pick. Full disclosure, I bet Seattle at +6.5. And to me, the Seahawks and the Falcons are two teams where you got to ask yourself, are we riding peak Seattle? Are we riding peak Atlanta? Is it time to get out of them in the market, both in the same range of underdogs this week? Although the line on Seattle has gone from 6.5 down to 5.5, 5. In some places it's 4.5. Raybon, do you have a floor of where you wouldn't bet Seattle?
I would take it up to 4.5 because, 4 it's not a big key number, but, you can get like a 24-20, something like that. So I think 4.5 is a good place to cut it.
All right, Raybon, let me ask you this. Koerner just gave all these reasons why we should take the Jags -3 at home. And yet I know you disagree, and I know you like the Giants. Explain yourself. Why don't you tell Koerner why he's wrong?
Listen, I love the luck rankings. I use them for a lot of the picks that I make. So I'm not going to throw any shade at the luck rankings. But I'll just say this. It's such an unprecedented situation with Jacksonville because they've only played 6 games and 2 have been against the Colts, who their offense just matches up perfectly with because the Colts play nothing but zone. So in 2 games against the Colts, Trevor Lawrence has completed 86% of his passes. And in the other 4 games, he's completing, like 58% of his passes, and his numbers look just like his rookie year. So it's kind of a weird situation where it just depends on what you think of like strength of schedule. But I just think, the Giants are the exact opposite. They play like the 3rd highest rate of man coverage in the league, and Jacksonville is a bottom 3 offense versus man coverage. So, I mean, it's a small sample all the way around, but that's my whole point. It's the Jags play 33% of their games against this team that they match up well with.
This is a really interesting one for me because, Simon, you and I will do the podcast, the Favorites podcast together, and we kept looking at Tennessee, and without any biases, if we were just looking at the number, you'd bet the short home favorite of less than a field goal in a divisional matchup. And that's what we have here, and yet we've had a hard time all week pulling the trigger on Tennessee. And I feel like in the spirit of the show, in the spirit of this segment, you've done exactly what you're supposed to do. You took a team where I was kind of on the fence, whereas with the Jags, I was all in, and Seattle, I was already all in. And you made me believe that the Tennessee Titans are the right side. Well done. Tennessee Titans -2.5. That is my choice. Time for our first fantasy segment. And listen, in case you haven't heard, Isiah Pacheco is going to be in the lineup today. So I think we got a lot of questions we'll get to in the second fantasy segment. In the first one, we're going to ask ourselves, in that game, Christian McCaffrey, will he be playing? If he does, what are we looking at for the San Francisco 49ers backfield? How is his absence going to impact the Carolina Panthers backfield? Samantha Previte, maybe the only Carolina Panthers fan in the country. Give us your take on the impact here.
Thank you, Chad. As much as I mourn the loss of Christian McCaffrey, I am looking forward to the 2023 season. So for the 49ers, they reportedly have a package of plays in their game plan for CMC, including some red zone action. So I assume he's going to be involved immediately. He probably won't see a full workload just because there's a near zero chance he would have learned the entire playbook in a matter of days. But also, in what universe would you have to be in to sit McCaffrey on fantasy, especially with 4 teams on bye? You would have to be super stacked at running back to have the luxury of sitting him, a luxury I personally don't have, so I will be rolling him out in my lineups. He is still a fringe RB1 who I would start in almost all situations, especially against the Chiefs, who rank 5th worst in fantasy points allowed to running backs and defensive DVOA, according to Football Outsiders. As for Jeff Wilson Jr., things do not look as rosy. He is the RB22 this year, but last week did break a streak of double-digit fantasy performances in half PPR He also has 2 fumbles, one of which was last week, where he saw a season low 31 snaps, 7 carries for 25 yards against Atlanta. Now he has to compete with McCaffrey. So rest of season, I think his outlook is terrible. In the immediate term, he could still offer some value with CMC not up to speed, but I think he's kind of like an RB4 option, even in this soft matchup against the Chiefs. As for Carolina, D'Onta Foreman is expected to lead the backfield with CMC gone over Chuba Hubbard. I talked about this in my look ahead waiver column last week. With the speculation of CMC being traded, I expected him to be the guy over Hubbard. We've seen him step up for the Titans after Derrick Henry went down last year. Weeks 9 through 18, he averaged over 9 fantasy points per game and was the RB8 and half PPR after the Titans week 13 bye. This year, he has 12 carries for 37 yards, not a huge sample size, but twice as many carries as Hubbard, who has 6 for 34 yards. He also has the slight edge in snap counts and outsnapped Hubbard 10-4 last week. This is a brutal home matchup, though, against the Bucs, whose defense is top 8 in rush DVOA and has allowed the fewest fantasy points to running backs this year. I mean, it's hard to get excited about Foreman or anyone on this team, this PJ Walker-led Panthers team, which may be in the middle of a fire sale. So Foreman falls into that low-end RB3 flex territory with downside. We talked about this on Green Dot Daily a lot. Dane Martinez loves to say, we'd rather have a slice of a watermelon than the entire grape. And this Panthers team is looking like the grape.
All right. Green Dot Daily every day, Monday to Friday at noon at Action Network HQ. Catch it on YouTube, watch it in the app. We know that Samantha would like the Panthers to tank for CJ Stroud. Koerner, you mentioned Josh Jacobs, your number 1 fantasy running back. What do you take from the move with CMC and how that impacts the Niners and the Panthers?
Yeah, so CMC will eventually be a top 5 back in this offense, obviously, but today he has a very wide range of outcomes, considering we just don't know how much playing time he'll get. As Samantha mentioned, he's apparently going to have a package of plays. We don't know how big that package is. But I'm guessing he's going to get a ton of high value touches in the red zone. So he's ranked currently as my RB19. I actually have him as a low end RB2. I think you have to play him either way. You're just lowering your expectations today is all. And then with Jeff Wilson, he's a very tough running back to trust today. He could still see around 10 to 15 touches possibly, but those are going to be just low value rush attempts between the 20s most likely. So he's my RB32. He's really only a guy you can start if you're really hurting with injuries or bye weeks, but his value dropped significantly with the acquisition of CMC. And with the Panthers situation, it's very murky. I think D'Onta Foreman will have the slight edge in early down work, and Chuba Hubbard will probably have a slight edge in passing down work. But as Samantha mentioned, this is not a great matchup today against the Buccaneers. So I'm sitting both. I have Foreman ranked as my RB35, Hubbard RB45. Really, we're just seeing, how this kind of shakes out this week, and maybe one of these backs will be an RB3 flex option next week against the Falcons.
All right, let's get on to the totals. We're going to have another fantasy segment in a few minutes where we are going to talk about the Chiefs, the 49ers opponents today and what's happening in their backfield, some news coming out over the last 24 hours. Listen, I previewed that we were going to talk more about the Texans and the Raiders. We don't talk about the best games on this show. We talk about the best opportunities. Sean Koerner, make us feel good.
Okay, I'll try. So I like the under in this Texans Raiders matchup. It's at 45.5 right now. And 71% of the action has been on the over for this game. And I'm not sure why. Sure, both defenses are below average here, but both teams are likely going to lean heavily on the run game here. Head coach Lovie Smith has come out and said they want to give rookie running back Dameon Pierce at least 20 carries a game. And that's great for fantasy. I love Dameon Pierce in fantasy, but it's probably going to result in the Texans facing third downs quite a bit. And the Texans have ranked the second worst in third down conversion rate. They average the second fewest yards per drive and average the fewest red zone drives per game. So I don't think they're going to be, scoring a ton of points today, despite the Raiders defense being a bit suspect. And I already went over, the Raiders are going to lean heavily on Josh Jacobs here. How could they not against this weak Texans run defense? Typically, they need to put up 30 plus points just to stand a chance to win. That's not going to be the case today with the Texans unlikely to run the score. So I just don't see this turning into a shootout. I'm projecting this much closer to the opener of 44. I like the value we're getting here at under 46.
All right. Well, as a Texans +7 backer, I like a low scoring game when there's a big spread. Simon, what do you got?
Could I interest you in a gross divisional under?
You
Browns.
always can.
Browns, Ravens, 46, 45.5. Just fits into a T. Two teams that I think people still view them as high power offenses, where I feel like the Browns had a coming to God moment last week with Brissett. It was just Stefanski after the game looked like he's going to change it up. They're going to go back to what got them to where they were early in the season. Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb is the reason that offensive goes. You got to stop putting the ball in Brissett's hand. I feel like they realized that last week. On the other side, the Ravens, they've struggled these last couple of weeks, right? 3 straight games now, they've been held to 20 points or less. That's a big deal in a Ravens offense. You expect to put up a lot of points. Just looks like the book is out on them, right? They haven't changed the scheme that much. If they have any type of injuries to their wide receiving group, and it's all on Mark Andrews, that's a problem. Now Mark Andrews coming to this week is banged up. That's an issue for an offense that relies so heavily on him. So to me, the public, I knew coming into this week, they'd be all over this over. The Browns this season, they're 5-1 towards the over. Simple bet to me to take the under here, right? Just playing the laws of averages in a divisional game. We know both these teams are run first. I like it. I like when it's a low total too, where when I first saw this open, I was like, okay, it should be closer to 47, 48. And then when you dive into the numbers, it's like, no, this should be probably closer to 44. This isn't kind of these high shooting flying offenses. These are two ball control teams. So it's a gross under, but it's a good divisional under. I feel like it's a safe play at 46, 45.5.
Yeah, it's gross, but not nearly as gross as what Raybon is going to try and convince us to do.
I mean, you know where I'm going. The
I do.
ugliest game on the slate, Jets, Denver, under 36.5. I mean, first of all, look at this Denver team with Russell Wilson. With Russell Wilson, they average 15.2 points per game. You know, they're allowing 16.5. So their combined total is about 31, 32 points. This is before they had to insert a backup quarterback. And then you got the Jets, a defense who, I keep saying this is a good defense. You know, their head coach is a defensive-minded guy, and they finally got talent to run his scheme. Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed on the outside, excellent cornerbacks that can contain Judy and Cortland Sutton. And then the Jets are top 6 in pressure rate, and Quinnen Williams is a game wrecker now. So both of these teams are actually top 6 in pressure rate. Rippon, in his stint as a starter in 2020, his passer rating under pressure was 27. And then Zach Wilson this year, Zach Wilson's passer rating from a clean pocket over 100. Great, cool. Under pressure, his passer rating is 3. Not 33, 3, just 3. He's 4 of 23 under pressure this year. And, you know, this is what's going to happen is both of these coaches know this. And so they're going to keep the ball on the ground. You know, the Broncos got 3 backs that they're working in. The Jets have a 2-headed backfield. So both of these teams are just going to run the ball, and that's going to bring up a lot of third downs, and these defenses are going to get pressure. It's going to be a lot of punts. We could get a 0-0 tie in this one.
Honest to God, like the line on this game has moved from Jets +2 to Jets -2 on the Russell Wilson news. That stat you just mentioned about Zach Wilson and his passer rating, I heard you mention it on the Action Network podcast, the NFL version that you do with Stuckey on Thursdays. It's amazing. That stat is insane. It just puts into perspective, Zach Wilson is not a very good quarterback yet. Maybe one day he will be, but it also shows that Robert Saleh has just decided, I'm not going to put the future of my career as a head coach in the hands of Zach Wilson. I'm putting it on my defense. I'm putting it in Breece Hall. I'm putting it in the backfield. There's no way Zach Wilson is going to do something in this offense that he is going to allow him to make the really bad mistakes. I know it's disgusting. I know this might be a total that feels like it should belong in a Pee Wee game, not an NFL game, but I'm with you, Raybon. The only reason to watch this game is to root for punts. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. I want Red Zone going to this game when there is a punt, just to respect all the underbettors. We're going to be on the under 36.5. Raybon, it's disgusting. I love it. That's what we do here. Well done. Let's get to the next fantasy segment. I mentioned Isiah Pacheco. He's going to be filling in or taking over for Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the Chiefs against the Niners today. Samantha, what do we make of all this happenings in the Chiefs backfield?
This is a pretty shocking development, as Pacheco had a pretty minimal role, primarily in early downs and very positive game scripts. He had one good game this year, which was against Arizona in week 1. He saw 12 rushes for 62 yards and a touchdown, almost all of which came after the Chiefs were handily beating the Cards. The rookie has been outsnapped by CEH 181-55 and outsnapped by Jerick McKinnon, who's also seen 172 snaps. And now he's taking first team reps and apparently has stood out in pass protection as well as efficiency. He has a 4.8 yards per carry versus CEH's 4.3. He was the Chiefs' 7th round pick this year out of Rutgers, which I think is quite the indictment against Edwards-Helaire, the first rounder from LSU, who has had a pretty strong year 3, currently the RB12.5 PPR. It is worth noting that 39% of his fantasy production has come from his 5 touchdowns, which tend to be a little bit fluky. He has also been completely shut down in each of the last 2 weeks against the Raiders and Bills. Pacheco is not a great start, though, as I assume CEH and McKinnon will still be somewhat involved. It is also a road matchup against the 49ers, who have the number 1 ranked defensive unit on the ground, according to Rush DVOA, and have allowed the 2nd fewest fantasy points to running backs this year, second only to the Bucs defense, who we already talked about earlier. That said, they have yet to play a team with a winning record, so I think it'll be interesting to see how this defense stacks up against the Chiefs, who lead the NFL in points per game. So Pacheco falls into that RB3 flex tier with 4 teams on bye for me.
Raybon, you have any thoughts on Isiah Pacheco?
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy, if you listen to me, if you listen to Koerner, we told you this guy was going to take over the backfield sooner than later. It was kind of out of the blue, just like middle of the night. I think Rappaport tweeted that, yeah, he's going to start. It's interesting that they're starting him against the toughest matchup for running backs. That kind of tells you, that they feel like they need him. So I'm projecting him for about 10.5 carries, 40 yards, and then about 13 receiving yards. So about 12 touches, 50 yards, and a little under 0.4 touchdowns. He's my RB 29. He's in that tier with Kenyon Drake and with Latavius Murray, guys we think are going to lead the backfield, but we don't expect too much from him. But if you need him, I think he is flex worthy. Edwards-Helaire is a tougher projection because they said he's still going to have a key role. But so I think that means McKinnon's work is going to, kind of go down as well. So Edwards-Helaire is my RB 39, 10 spots behind Pacheco. So I'm sitting him unless I'm in a super, super deep league. But I think Pacheco is a top 30 running back this week. Got a lot of talent, but it is a tough matchup.
Listen, folks, the NFL is crazy. In what world in week 7 did we think Josh Jacobs would be Koerner's number 1 rated running back in fantasy, and that Isiah Pacheco would be a top 30 rated running back in fantasy? Rovell, give us the latest news, my friend.
I think the latest news is that Chris Raybon is turning into a square through osmosis through it's on Wednesday. The most bet unders, Broncos Jets, number 1 there. I will tell you, that's really the only weather we're looking at, 20-mile-per-hour wind gusts. So as if anyone could throw in that game, if they did, it's a little bit challenging. Other bet unders, Buccaneers, Panthers, Giants, Jaguars, that's 39.5 and 43. Most bet overs, Ravens, Browns, as Simon alluded to, 45.5. People like that. Titans, Colts, 42, and Cowboys, Lions, 49. Our Convince Me poll, who is your favorite anytime touchdown scorer for Sunday Night Football? No surprise, Tyreek Hill up top, plus 105 is the odds, and that's at 41%. Jalen Waddle, Najee Harris going back and forth, plus 120 for Jalen Waddle, plus 175 for Najee Harris, 27% there. And I must tell you that this show, Convince Me, is presented by Bet365, the world's favorite sports book. Sign up with promo code ACTION to get Bet365's exclusive sign up. Only available in New Jersey and Colorado. Bet $1 on any game, get $200 free. And I am asking you guys because I see that people are going with Jalen Waddle at plus 105. Do people normally go with Tyreek Hill plus 105? Do people normally go with the easiest one, or after seeing Mike Gesicki score 2 touchdowns, do they go for a plus 500, 600, 700? Who's your favorites?
Koerner, you start.
I like Chase Claypool at plus 275.
There you go.
Simon, what about you?
I'll go chalky. I'll go with Cheetah, Tyreek Hill, plus 105. I just think with Tua back, he's going to take a bunch of shots deep to him.
Raybon?
Give me Deontay at plus 220.
Deontay at plus 220. All right, listen, we've broken down the player props, the fantasy news, the sides, the totals. Now we're giving you a couple of takes on anytime touchdowns. Stick around for Gilles Gallant and Nick Giffen in the touchdown show that's coming up right after this. For Sean Koerner, for Simon Hunter, for Chris Raybon, for Samantha Previte, for Darren Rovell, for our fantastic producers. I am Chad Millman. This has been Convince Me, brought to you by Bet365. Everything you want, all the picks, all the data, all the research, available for free in the award-winning Action Network app. Stay tuned. Touchdown show coming up.
Thank you, Chad, and the whole Convince Me crew. Great job as always. And welcome to the Touchdown Show on the Action Network, presented by Bet365. I am Gilles Gallant. I'm joined every week with my man, Dr. Nick Giffen. Now, Nick, the guys that convinced me, they were just discussing an anytime touchdown poll from our own Darren Rovell, which is relevant to what we are going to be discussing today. And the results kind of surprised me on where the public was voting. Now, the 4 options they had were Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Najee Harris, and Deontay Johnson for the Steelers-Dolphins game tonight. Most of the love was going to Tyreek Hill. That didn't really surprise me, but the little love shown to Deontay Johnson, I was just shocked by that. Do you think this is accurate based on your projections?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely understand why, I guess the public isn't on Deontay just because he has the longest odds and people like betting guys that are maybe more household names, a little closer to being a favorite just because they're more likely to hit their bet. But for me, I think the value here is on Najee Harris because having projected plus 145, he just gets enough volume that I'm not too worried about the lack of run game there. It's just all about volume. So I've got him projected at plus 145. So plus 175 there is very nice value on Najee Harris.
I love that. And I love that you use the word volume because Deontay Johnson has the most targets in the NFL without a touchdown yet this season. They're just forcing it to him. So again, that was one of the parts that kind of surprised me there. But I'll have more picks for Sunday Night Football later tonight on my Twitter account and in the Action Network app. But Nick, let's talk about the afternoon games. These picks today, we're each going to have 5 touchdown picks, anytime touchdown picks today, and they're going to be for the 1 p.m. Eastern and 4 p.m. Eastern games. We'll start with the lowest odds and work our way up to the long shot odds. Also, we have a very special anytime touchdown boosted parlay from Bet365 that we're going to reveal after we give out our top picks. You should stick around because it's a doozy. And if this is your first time watching the Touchdown Show, make sure to download the Action Network app, as this has all of mine and Nick's picks tracked. You can get them as soon as we bet them at the sportsbook, and you can track your picks too. Now, the Touchdown Show is presented by Bet365, the world's favorite sportsbook brand. If you sign up with promo code ACTION, you'll get Bet365's exclusive sign-up offer in both New Jersey and Colorado. You bet $1 on any game, Nick, you get $200 free. One of the best promos out there. Sign up with Bet365 today. All right, let's get started with the touchdown scorer picks, Nick. We're going to start with the red zone bets. So these are touchdown picks with odds less than plus 250. As always, I'll get us started. And I'll be looking in the afternoon slate at the Seahawks Chargers and looking at DK Metcalf at plus 160, Nick. Now, Metcalf, a bit of a boomer bust pick, but honestly, these odds are too good to pass up. Metcalf can have one game where he'll be, explosive, and then one game where he's kind of forgotten. I think it's sometimes matchup dependent because last week for Arizona, he only had 2 catches on 7 targets, and historically just hasn't fared well in that divisional matchup. But this week's matchup against the Chargers, very, very wide receiver friendly. The Bolts have been getting just abused from the past this season, especially corner, and I kind of feel bad for him at this point. Cornerback J.C. Jackson, who signed that big free agent deal in the offseason because, according to Pro Football Focus, he's allowed a 155.3 passer rating in coverage this season. That's second last for all corners who have seen 10 or more targets. And it's shown up in the stats. The Chargers rank bottom 5 in touchdowns to wide receivers with 7. And Metcalf, for as awesome as he has 9 red zone targets this year. That leads the team. And he has at least 2 looks in the red zone in 4 straight games. So I like to get a nice little easy winner off the hop. I think DK Metcalf is going to have a field day against this Chargers defense. So that's my first pick of week 7.
I like it. We've got a lot of picks in this game. So you'll hear more from this game as we go on in the show. And, we were on the Seahawks, Arizona last week, and that game produced a dud. I don't think we're going to see a dud.
Yeah, 19-9 game.
Exactly. We didn't get the touchdowns in that one, but I think we're getting some touchdowns with the Seahawks versus the Chargers this week. So for my first pick in the red zone, I am going with Chris Godwin plus 165 in that Buccaneers versus Panthers game. I know I went with Godwin last week, but I am going with Godwin again this week. He has been, we talked about volume with Najee Harris. He has been a target monster when he has been on the field this year. He's been targeted on 17.5% of the routes he's run, and he has 22.2% of the target share in the 4 games he's played. But really, he we're counting those as like full games he's played, but he's only played the equivalent of like 3 full games because he got injured 19 snaps in the first game of the season. And then a couple weeks ago, only played about half of the snaps. So he hasn't even really played 3 full games, yet he has 22% of the targets in 4 games. So if we were to shorten that to 3 games, that would be increased for sure because we're counting all those receivers in those 4 games. Well, he gets a great matchup versus an awful Panthers defense. They are 25th in defensive pass DVOA. And, it's kind of interesting here because the Panthers have been better against wide receiver 1, which would be Mike Evans on this team, 9th in defensive DVOA, according to Football Outsiders. But they've struggled versus other wide receivers, whether it's wide receiver 2 or other wide receivers or slot receivers, which fits Chris Godwin here. So Godwin, just absolute TD monster. He has scored a touchdown in 11 of 27 career regular season games when Tom Brady has been his quarterback, while he's also played at least 60% of the snaps. That's equivalent to about plus 145. I've seen odds as low as plus 130. So I would bet Chris Godwin down to plus 160 for my anytime touchdown bet. First one in the red zone.
I love that pick, man. And I think Godwin is the guy that's just ready to explode. He's that type of wide receiver that just an overall value with Brady as his quarterback should probably be in the plus 120 to plus 130 range, regardless of opponent. But I think it's part of it as well is just the Bucs have kind of struggled, maybe a little bit of an overreaction to that Steelers game last week. I mean, the Panthers are in shambles. So this could be a game where I'm legit worried that the Panthers might even just get shut out from the start. I'll talk a little bit more about that game later in the show. But let's move over to another high-profile matchup, though, in the afternoon slate, and that would be the Kansas City Chiefs versus the San Francisco 49ers, a rematch of a couple years ago from the Super Bowl. And we're going to take the wide receiver from the 49ers. We're taking Brandon Ayuk at plus 185. Now, this Chiefs defense, for everything that their offense is, defense has just been piss poor stopping the pass, man. I don't really have a better way to describe it, especially to wide receivers. They've allowed 9 touchdowns to the wide receiver position, Nick. That's last in the NFL. And if you look at who has scored on the Chiefs this season, it's the wide receiver ones that are crushing them. Of those 9 touchdowns, 7 of them were the top dog from their opponents. It's all been pretty much one game that a wide receiver 1 hasn't scored a touchdown on them. Now, I know some people from definition purposes would say, well, Deebo Samuel is the wide receiver 1. Well, he is, but he's more of a satellite player on San Francisco, especially going into the backfield. He'll sometimes play in the slot. It's actually Ayuk who's been getting majority of the snaps on the outside, playing 90% of snaps week in, week out. And he showed his physical toughness even last week against Atlanta. 2 touchdowns in the red zone versus the Falcons. And I think the Niners might need to do a quick strike offense against this Chiefs defense, because if this game gets out of hand, I think Ayuk is the guy who could be that quick strike guy for Jimmy Garoppolo and the 49ers. And especially because Christian McCaffrey coming over, I don't really know how much of a factor he's going to be in this offense, just only like 2 days of practice, if that. So I like Brandon Ayuk to score a touchdown against the Chiefs this week at plus 185.
There we go. I like it. I'm going to hop right into my next pick in the red zone, and I'm going to head over to that Jaguars versus the Giants. I'm going to take James Robinson plus 165 to score a touchdown. Got to kick it off with this. This is one of our big things that's we've been doing in the predictive analytics team.
I love it.
The luck rankings, which are 14-2 against the spread if we have teams that are more than 16 places apart in our luck rankings for the underdog team. 14-2 against the spread. Well, the Jaguars are one of the biggest luck spread differentials of the week. They're 27 places worse than the Giants in luck, which means 14-2, they definitely fit that bill. They're already favored around -3 versus the Giants. Obviously, you got to shop around, but the whole point is they're favored and our luck rankings like them, so they're probably going to cover the -3 spread. If that's the case, you get James Robinson at home, covering the spread. I think we're going to have really good touchdown opportunity here. If they're leading, of course, there's going to be more rushing attempts, more touchdown opportunity. Plus, James Robinson, he's the guy you want to have. He is the back you want to have if the Jaguars are getting in the red zone. He's got 32 rushing attempts in the red zone this year versus 8 for Travis Etienne. And that number is 4 versus 1 when we go inside the 5-yard line. The Giants do struggle versus the run. They are 28th in defensive DVOA versus the run. So I really like this number. Plus 110 is as low as I've seen this number elsewhere. So plus 165, very good value. Our projections have plus 145 as fair value.
I love this. And speaking of the luck rankings, for anybody who has like James Robinson in fantasy, for example, like they must just be cursing Trevor Lawrence, because last week, for example, just at the 1-yard line, Trevor Lawrence runs it in twice, poaches 2 touchdowns. I don't think we're going to see that again against the Giants. I think the Giants will be ready for that this time. So James Robinson, as a by default, is probably going to be able to score in that position. And I'm going to be sticking with the Robinson here. We're going to be looking at the Packers Commanders. And here's to you, Mrs. Robinson. We're going with Brian Robinson at plus 210 to score a touchdown against the Packers today. And it's a bit of a momentum pick, Nick, because I think you can't overlook a running back one when you're getting over plus 200 odds. Robinson got the majority of carries in his second game against Chicago on the road, 15 carries, and most importantly, 4 red zone carries. Antonio Gibson didn't get one, neither did J.D. McKissick. It was all Brian Robinson. And the Packers, they're a mess. The Commanders are actually a very popular pick today to win outright at home against the Packers. But the Packers, the defense, especially against the run, has just been struggling, man. They've allowed 5 rushing touchdowns over their last 3 games. And it was running back ones that were scoring too. So you have Breece Hall, Saquon Barkley, Damian Harris, just as examples. Now we've got Taylor Heineke coming in for the Commanders. I think that actually helps Robinson in a little spot here, because I think the Commies, I think they're going to try to build around the run, try to keep Aaron Rodgers off the field. That lends itself to Brian Robinson to be able to score there, maybe in a red zone opportunity. And then when you're shopping around, I've seen Brian Robinson as low as plus 150 in some spots. He's at plus 175. So I think if you could still grab him at plus 200, I've seen him at some books as well, still at this price range. I think you should grab it if you could find it. So Brian Robinson at plus 210 is my third pick of week 7.
You're picking right to my heartstrings, man, with a Commander's pick there. So very much like that one.
So Nick, why don't we move on from the red zone bets? Let's move over to the midfield bets. So these are our touchdown picks with odds between plus 250 and plus 500. I got us started in the red zone. Why don't you get us started at midfield?
Sounds good to me. You picked my Commanders. I'm going to pick your Cowboys here.
Yes.
Going to the Cowboys versus the Lions game. Noah Brown plus 290 to get in the end zone. First of all, even before we get in the fact that Dak is back, I think the Cowboys here, they're in a really good situation just to score. So everybody is going to be on CD Lamb. I think Gallup is going to get a lot of attention. That's going to leave Noah Brown a little undervalued in, fantasy, but also I think in the books he's being undervalued. Obviously we get that Dak Prescott boost here, but the Lions, they're dead last in defensive DVOA.
And
they're
everything.
32nd versus the run and 31st versus the pass. I mean, that's awful. So Dallas is going to move the ball, and there's going to be a lot of touchdown opportunity. Noah Brown, he does get 33%. of the team's red zone targets so far this year. Now, I know Gallup was out for some of that, but still 33% of the red zone targets with 7 and 6 games is definitely nothing to sneeze at there. Obviously that's incredible. And also the luck rankings actually favor Detroit in this game.
Ooh.
So if we like Detroit to maybe cover here, keep the game kind of close, and they're a terrible offense and a terrible defense and a great offense, this has shootout potential. So I think if we got this close game, shootout potential, let's go with the plus 290 receiver in this game. I've seen odds as low as plus 210, and we have fair projected plus 250.
And see, I like Noah Brown mainly because of what you kind of mentioned about how he's kind of being overlooked because of all the high profile names on this offense, like a CeeDee Lamb, a Gallup, Ezekiel Elliott, and Tony Pollard, maybe to a lesser extent. But Noah Brown has been doing a lot of the heavy lifting for the passing game while Dak Prescott has been out. And I think Noah Brown, especially at plus 290, especially with this game having, I believe it's the highest total of the week, if it's not Chargers Seahawks, there's going to be potential for everybody to eat this week. So I think Noah Brown, Gallup, CeeDee Lamb, Ezekiel Elliott, I think they could all score a touchdown today. But Noah Brown, I agree with you, I think is offering the best value. All right, now let's look at the AFC North matchup. This is between the Cleveland Browns and Baltimore Ravens. And Nick, I'm not sure if anybody has mentioned this to you, but I've gotten so many DMs reminding me of what today is, and that it's National Tight Ends Day. And we're going to go with David Njoku at plus 340 for the Cleveland Browns. Now, National Tight Ends Day, it's the 4th Sunday of every October. And for reference, like last year, just a touchdown frenzy. Guys like Hunter Henry, Michael Pruitt, Gesicki, Foster Moreau, your boy Mo Alley Cox, they all scored last year, and everybody couldn't wait till next year or this year to be able to do it again. Now, back to Njoku. Now, although Amari Cooper, he has gotten the majority of targets and red zone looks in the Browns offense, Njoku is right there. It's just touchdowns. This is the only difference. Now, Njoku, he has 8 red zone targets this year. That's 4th in the NFL for all tight ends behind Travis Kelce, Zach Ertz, Mark Andrews. And he's also played nearly double the snaps as tight end 2, Harrison Bryant, who's right around the plus 500 range to score a touchdown. The Ravens, they've given up 4 touchdowns to tight ends this year. That's bottom 5 in the NFL. And guys like Daniel Bellinger and Hayden Hurst, in those last 2 games against the Bengals and the Giants, those were the leading receivers. So another trend worth noting, though, is that Njoku has actually played the Ravens 7 times in his career. And again, this is a trend. I wouldn't bet this just based on this trend, but I just found it interesting that he has scored in 3 of those 7 games against the Ravens. Every one were in Baltimore. So a little food for thought that I don't know what it is. When he plays in Baltimore, he balls out. It could be a garbage time touchdown. It could be just a go-ahead touchdown. It doesn't really matter. It all counts the same in the end. Give me David Njoku at plus 340 as my midfield bet of week 7.
There you go. I like it. We've had a few themes here. We've got the Robinson theme. We got the tight end theme. And I'm sticking with that tight end theme. I'm also sticking with the Noah theme. I had Noah Brown, and I'm going with Noah Fant. Plus 490 to get in the end zone, Seahawks versus Chargers. You can actually find a plus 500 number out there now. It has moved since I made this pick. So I would definitely pick it at plus 500 if I'm picking plus 490. I'm going back to the well here with Noah Fant. I had him last week. He didn't score a touchdown, but he fared really well. So we're going to keep the faith here with Noah Fant. He's in a great matchup. Last week, he had that great matchup versus Arizona, where he had 6 catches on a season-high 7 targets, including a red zone target, and he made the catch in the red zone. He just didn't get a touchdown. But I like to see that volume when he's in a great situational matchup. And the Chargers, well, told you we were coming back to this game. They do struggle versus the tight end as well. They're allowing the 8th most yards per game to the tight end position. So overall, we got a guy that produced in a positive matchup. He's in another positive matchup. That doesn't mean we shy away from him just because he didn't get in the end zone. There's a reason he's plus 480, plus 490, whatever. I mean, I don't think he should be that high. I think he should be around plus 400 or even lower. So he's not likely to score a touchdown, but the odds are relative to, what we're getting here for the plus 490 number. I think Noah Fant is a great pick to get into the end zone. I have plus 370 as fair. So that means plus 490 is a 25.5% ROI here. Noah Fant is my second midfield bet of the week.
I love that. And one of the things that I love about Noah Fant too is that coming out of college and even in Denver, like he's been that kind of pass catching tight end. I think he was supposed to surpass Will Dissly and Eskridge like in this offense. He just hasn't really been put in that position fully yet, but you're slowly seeing him growing into that role. And especially in this game where, you know, you're seeing totals around 50, there's going to be a lot of touchdowns in this game. And even though while I like the Chargers to cover at a -5 favorite, I still think the Seahawks, just their offense and with Geno time, they're able to put up points, especially in the passing game, which is why I like Metcalf and why you like Fant today. So those are our midfield bets. We're going to be moving on now to our long shot bets. So this is any touchdown pick that Nick and I like over +500 odds. And Nick, this is probably the grossest pick I've ever made on the show. And I can't stress this enough that some people, they'll probably see this pick and be like, ugh, like just the old Tim Allen home improvement. Like, who? Anyway, we're going to be looking now at the Tampa Bay Bucks and Carolina Panthers game. And we're going to be looking at a wide receiver for the Panthers. We're taking Shi Smith at +600. And why I called this the grossest pick I've ever made on the show is because I'm legitimate worried that the Panthers are going to get shut out here, just because of all the turmoil that has happened with this team, all the guys leaving the field, starters, you know, like a Robbie Anderson and Christian McCaffrey. But we're going to take a stab on Shi Smith because, as I just kind of mentioned, there's legitimate nobody left on Carolina to score. Like McCaffrey is gone. Anderson sulked his way out. DJ Moore, if you look at his body language, he looks despondent sometimes on the sideline or watching a ball bounce in the dirt to him. So here's the encouraging part about Shi Smith, and it kind of goes back to when a couple weeks ago when we took Olamide Zaccheaus in this exact same spot. Smith is playing 70% of the snaps at the wide receiver position, and that was before those trades happened. Now, as a result, he's going to be bumped up to wide receiver 2 in this offense just because it's him and Terrace Marshall that's really left, you know. And one of the things that is encouraging about Shi Smith is he's second on the team in red zone targets. He's got 3 this season. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey was the leader in red zone targets, but he is no longer on the team. Now, the Panthers playing at home against a Bucs team that low-key has been getting beaten in the air. 3 touchdowns to wide receivers in the last 2 games. The Bucs defense, they've allowed 9 passing touchdowns this season, only 3 on the ground. And that is the book on the Buccaneers defense, is that their run defense is very strong, but their secondary and their pass defense is a little susceptible to a higher powered offense. I'm not sure if I'm willing to call PJ Walker a high powered offense, but I do think we could see a touchdown from Shi Smith, maybe a quick early strike or even a garbage time grab. And as I kind of alluded to earlier, it all counts the same in the end. So Shi Smith at +600 is my long shot bet of week 7.
Yeah. I mean, wide receiver 2 +600. It's hard to pass up, even with as bad as the Panthers offense has been. I'm going to go to my long shot pick here. Once again, that Chargers Seahawks game. I'm going with Justin Herbert +650 to score a touchdown. So heading over to the quarterback position here. The first thing to know about this, I mean, +650, that's a big number on him. But Herbert, and I'm going to quote my boss, Sean Koerner here, he's over his rib injury and there should be plenty of points scored here. Well, if there's going to be plenty of points scored, then I would assume that means the Chargers will be in the red zone enough. And if they are, there's always the chance that Herbert rushes in a touchdown. He does have 8 touchdowns in 38 career games. That would be the equivalent of +375 odds if that was his odds going forward. The Hawks, they've given up 21.5 yards per game to quarterbacks. So, certainly quarterbacks can run on them. We saw Kyler Murray grab 100 himself. Now, obviously, Justin Herbert isn't Kyler Murray, but you get the point. You can move the ball if you're a quarterback on these Seahawks. And if we do remove the game right after he hurt his ribs, Justin Herbert, his rushing attempts pretty much are the same as the past 2 years. Each of the last 2 years, he averaged 3.7 rush attempts per game. This year, removing the rib injury game, he's at 3.4 rushing attempts per game. So even if that +375 equivalent needs to get bumped up a little bit, +650 is just way too long. There's huge odds discrepancy here. I've seen numbers for Herbert all the way down to +400. But our friends at Bet365, they have the value here, +650 on Justin Herbert. Really like that as my long shot pick of the week.
Well, we're company men, Nick. I think that's why we have to make sure to just give a little shout out to Bet365 here.
Absolutely.
But I think the one thing you stressed this, and I thought this was important, was that the touchdown odds discrepancy of seeing him as low as plus 400, especially when you look at his historical odds. Like last year, Justin Herbert, his touchdown odds usually ranged in between plus 350 and plus 500. And it was really dependent on the matchup. But you're facing a Seahawks team that is just getting destroyed on in the run game. And not to say that Austin Eckler couldn't score a touchdown himself, but you could see a lot of third down opportunities where Justin Herbert just takes off and runs. And even last week against Denver, for example, he was only plus 500 to score a touchdown. So the fact that, we talked about this off air, the Seahawks ain't Denver. You know what I mean? Like there's a big difference in that defense. So Justin Herbert is a great way to round out our picks for week 7. And of those picks, let's go back over them just to make sure, get everybody up to speed. So my 5 picks this week were DK Metcalf at plus 160, Brandon Ayuk at plus 185, Brian Robinson at plus 210, David Njoku at plus 340, and Shi Smith at plus 600. Ugh. And Nick, your picks today, you've got Chris Godwin at plus 165, James Robinson also at plus 165. You've got Noah Brown, my boy from the Cowboys, at plus 290, Noah Fant at plus 490, and finally, Justin Herbert at plus 650. So now, Bet365, as we mentioned, is the sponsor of the show, but they have done us a solid today, Nick. They've given us an anytime touchdown boosted same game parlay for Colts Titans. I don't know if you guys noticed who are watching that we didn't necessarily make a pick for Colts Titans today. And there's a reason for that, because we have an awesome same game parlay to unveil. And here it is. Derrick Henry and Jonathan Taylor, both to score a touchdown at plus 333. It was plus 260 if you had just parlayed them both, now at plus 333. So just a little bit of background here. Derrick Henry, I mean, I'll try to explain as best I can for anybody who's been living in a coma and doesn't know who Derrick Henry is, but Derrick Henry is the man. He has 104 carries in 5 games, 6 red zone carries inside the 10-yard line, Nick, and 5 touchdowns in his last 4 games. Now, Jonathan Taylor, coming off injury, but was a stud last season, regularly minus 200. You could even still bet his touchdown odds individually at like plus 110 in some spots. But Nick, we've got the same game parlay at plus 333. So what's the expected line for this outcome compared to what we're getting here?
Yeah, so I think this boost is really nice. Before the boost, obviously, plus 260 was fair. We weren't quite showing value at plus 260. We were at plus 275. But that means plus 333, that boost is value. Now, there is potentially a little negative correlation between Derrick Henry and Jonathan Taylor because they're running backs on opposite teams. So if one team gets ahead, maybe Derrick Henry scores, then the other team's going to start throwing a little more. But that average correlation is only around negative 7%. So even with that factored in, we're around plus 300 as fair. So plus 333, very nice value on this boost, courtesy of our friends at Bet365.
And I think the one thing, too, that I would bring up, Nick, is that unlike other running backs, these two teams, their whole offense is built around these running backs. And especially with how broken the Colts offenses looked, of how dire their offenses looked without Jonathan Taylor. Like I could see them being down 2 scores and still being in a red zone and rushing it in into the end zone. Same thing with Derrick Henry. And I think both of these guys have a legitimate chance to score today. Getting that nice little boost there, I think is really going to push it over the top. And Bet365, the touchdown show, is presented by Bet365, the world's favorite sportsbook brand. If you sign up with promo code ACTION to get Bet365's exclusive sign-up offer in both New Jersey and Colorado, you can bet $1 on any game and get $200 free. It's just that simple. Okay, well, Nick, all of our picks are in. The Super Boost Parlay is out. That's all for today. 5 picks from me, 5 picks from you. We're going to see you next Sunday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern as part of the new Action Network Power Hour. And if you missed Convince Me, make sure to download the Action Network app. You can get all of the picks from that show in one place. And you can also check out all of the bets from the Touchdown Show on the Action app. And you can also track your bets too. Also, touchdown score picks will be coming out later today for Steelers Dolphins. You can find those on my Twitter account as well in the Action Network app. Make sure to follow me on Twitter at GDog5000. Make sure to follow Nick too at RotoDoc. I want to thank you for watching the Touchdown Show presented by Bet365. Bon chance.